Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. And today's guest is Daniel DeBaun, speaking on protecting yourself and your family from EMF radiation. Daniel DeBaun is an internationally recognized expert in EMF radiation, EMF shielding, and EMF-related health issues, with special focus on the effect of exposure from mobile devices such as laptops, tablets, and cell phones. Daniel's concern regarding the health impact of EMF emissions grew from over 30 years of engineering experience in the telecommunications industry, where he held a variety of executive positions at SAIC, Telcordia, AT&T, and Bell Labs. He is a co-author of Radiation Nation: The Fallout of Modern Technology. Dan, hi, welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Laura, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about sharing electromagnetic radiation information to your listening audience. So thanks again for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning, Dan, about what EMF radiation is and why it's something that we need to know more about.
It's a great question. When this has only really been around our environment for the last 15 years or so, in a sense that it's very close to our bodies. The most electromagnetic radiation that we were exposed to was the wiring in our homes, the refrigerators that operate all day, electric devices that were operating around us. But most of the time, these technologies were really fairly far away from us. It's only in the last 10 to 15 years we're using these devices that makes our lives very convenient. Cell phones, laptops, tablets. We have all these devices and oftentimes multiple devices around us. Well, they're communicating. These devices are communicating to stuff outside of their own technology. And like, for example, when you're on a laptop, you may be connected to your router with a Wi-Fi connection. When you're on your cell phone, you may be connected to a cell tower that's 2 miles away. That same cell phone may be also using Bluetooth that's connecting to your stereo system in your car. So when you talk, you're not using your phone itself. Or it could also be in your cell phone a Wi-Fi connection that's connecting to your router in the house. So all of our technologies that have been around us today didn't really exist 10, 15 years ago. So these technologies, the way it works is they're electromagnetic radiation. They're like, think of it as on the tip of your finger, you have a pulse that's coming out. It's a round ball that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, that's what each one of these transmitters of all our technologies around us are doing. So they're filling the room. One transmitter is filling the room, and it's connecting to the cell tower. And that is what is called omnidirectional. It's in all directions. So when you're using a cell phone close to you, it's going to the cell tower, but it's also hitting you. It's literally touching your body. And you're constantly being radiated, as I said before, with something that really hasn't existed but more than the last 15 years or so. So it's the technology around us. It's the stuff we really have embraced. And at the same time, it's a new environmental influence for the body. And
right. Our bodies weren't, we haven't, evolved to be able to manage that exposure, right?
Dr. Laura, that's exactly right. It's like the body doesn't know what to do with it. So in some cases, we see symptoms with one set of people and then a very different set with another set. Each body is responding. There's not a genetic pattern of resistance to a toxin in our environment because it hasn't been around very long.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. It's something we can't see, right? And it's something that a lot of us don't think about. And technology is just part of our life, right? We can't imagine not going somewhere without our phone, right? Like if you leave your
Right.
phone at home, it's like you're naked.
Exactly, right?
If you have a child, you know how sometimes, like if you're at a restaurant, a tablet is life changing to be able to give you a little break, a little peace and quiet. Computers, I mean, it is something we use all day, every day. And even people will sleep with their cell phone next to them at bed. They have their smartwatch that they sleep with to monitor their sleep. So the exposure is 24/7.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about sleep because that's a sanctuary and that's a subject everyone should know about. I'd like to also go back a tiny bit when we were talking about the sources. You were saying you can't see it. Well, it's also true you can't smell it. And you can't see it. So all of our senses are really not attuned to the physical waves that are around you.
Right. So it is physical, but we need like a spidey sense to pick it up.
Right, exactly. Except for sunlight. Sunlight is actually electromagnetic radiation, and of course, sunlight is so important to our health. But there is a monitor in front of us. There's a tablet that has a monitor, and they're emitting visible electromagnetic radiation, but very high intensity electromagnetic radiation. And some of you may have heard that the blue light part of those emissions can be damaging as well. And so you have to be aware of those things as well, because that will affect your sleep, believe it or not.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit how that does impact sleep?
Yeah, I will. When you go outside, you're awake because there's sunlight. When you go into your cave at night, where there's no light, what's happening? Your body's evolving; it's changing, and there's a process that's occurring, that's changing within the body to turn on melatonin. The melatonin itself is actually being created as a result of lack of light. So when you're sitting in front of a monitor and there's the blue component of that signal going into your eye, the eye, in the back of the eye, there's a tiny little switch. There's a cryptochrome protein, actually, that is behind the eye. And it's the little switch that turns on and off the melatonin. So if you're looking at this at 11 o'clock at night and you've decided to go to sleep, the little switch didn't go on, so you don't have melatonin. All of a sudden, there's a disruption of your sleep pattern. That's not a good thing.
Right. No.
Because of the visible light.
Right. So the visible light confuses our natural circadian rhythm to not tell our body when to produce melatonin, which helps us sleep.
Absolutely. And by the way, the impact can be very broad. If you've disrupted your circadian rhythm, particularly around the recovery of the body from the day, you have a recovery of the mitochondrial function. It's during the day that you're using that function, and at night you're in repair. So when you start mucking around with your sleep cycle, you're also mucking around with recovery cycles and everything else that's part of your body.
Yeah, the recovery and the healing of the body occurs while we sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So, in fact, I'll get to the heart of the challenge. When you're in bed at night, you do not want to have that external influence around your body, whether they be the tablet and the blue light, or the cell phone on the side desk or the side table
nightstand.
next to your the nightstand next to your bed. That is influencing literally the brain pattern. and the body function. Believe it or not, it's suppressing your immune. Electromagnetic radiation, Dr. Ollie Johansson actually is the author of this recently, where it's literally suppressing immune as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on when you have all these technologies around you. And at night, it is so important that sanctuary has none of this. So, long story short. So
you're saying it suppresses our immune system. Is that because it's negatively impacting sleep, or that's a separate issue?
No, that's a separate issue.
Wow.
Literally, it's a separate issue. I didn't mention this before, but something like 20% of us are electric hypersensitive. That is, we get headaches, we may get nauseous. There may be psychological, neurological dizziness. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on when you're exposed to these kinds of technologies.
Right. And then 20% are like the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, exactly.
That are extra sensitive to that radiation.
Yeah. And believe it or not, 80% of that is women.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
Women are more sensitive.
Right.
Yeah.
It's literally true. Women are more sensitive to this than men. And it's more disruptive to their biofunctions than with men.
Right, which would include probably their menstrual cycle,
yes.
Their fertility as well.
Yeah, well, fertility, as you know, we can't make babies anymore. Why can't we make babies anymore? There are a lot of external reasons why that's true. There's a lot of toxins in our environment that didn't exist.
Epigenetic factors.
Absolutely. Well, it also turns out that there's like 20, 30 studies that talk about in vitro influence of electromagnetic radiation to ADHD, to many very, very serious body responses to this that didn't exist before, including you can't make babies. After about 25% of a laptop on your lap, the 25% of the male sperm is immobile. There's also equivalent functions that occur with the female because it's soft tissue. And so there's clearly biological influences. But what people don't realize is that the radiation from your laptop or your cell phones, when you have it in your back pocket of your pants, it is literally influencing the womb. And Dr. Powell is a biochemist who talks about the damage to the DNA cell of an egg of a female, and that egg of that 12-year-old evolves. She has a child, and there could be mutated DNA as a result of that cell phone, and that is actually something that's more and more being realized, is that when you have a cell phone close to your body like that, it does influence very important parts of the body. It's also true. There was a study in San Francisco a few years ago where a doctor actually gave meters to women in their first trimester. And they went out and they measured their environment and everywhere they went. The bottom line of the study was that every time there was a concentration of excess electromagnetic radiation, there was 3 times more likely a miscarriage in the first trimester. So it was like there is some evidence that says it's pretty serious, and growing evidence that's reinforcing that. So you don't want a cell phone in your back pocket, whether you're a child or an adult.
Right. Or your front pocket.
Or your front pocket. Or your bra, right? Women
or your bra.
Right? Women put their and doctor, I went and I have cancer right on my breast, just right where I put my cell phone. Surprise, surprise.
Right. We hear about people with these rare brain tumors. And they're the ones who've had the cell phone against their head all the time. They're always on the phone. And they had it. This is also before I think the AirPods got popular. So people were doing more of the phone directly against their head. And now I think it's such a blessing that we can do something like, what about an AirPod? That's what I try to use when I'm talking on the phone. or Bluetooth in my car? I mean, I know I still have some exposure, but isn't it minimized?
It's less.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the frontal lobe. It turns out that when you have electromagnetic exposure like that, it can influence and will influence a cell in the frontal lobe, by and large because it's the softest tissue. The standards are by the U.S. They worry and get concerned about the thermal impact of that radiation. The standard allows your area around the cell phone to increase thermally by 2 degrees. They do not talk about the biological impacts. The standard is, just so you know, is 1.6 watts per kilogram. That is a fairly low powered signal, but that signal was designed based on 6-foot males.
Oh.
And that 6-foot male, that signal can go into that male 1 to 2 inches. It was a standard that was created 30 some odd years ago.
You mean if the phone is next to his body, it can penetrate, you said, 1 to 2 inches?
Yes, exactly. So why is that important? Well, it represents about 3% of the population. It represents use that was 30 some odd years ago for cell phones. And as we talked about before, it's 10 to 15 years that we have it close to our bodies. And we have 6-year-olds using cell phones fairly regularly. And that signal, because of the premature growth and the softest tissue around the cell phone, it goes right through their heads. So when you have a child using a cell phone that's 6 years old, it's not going in 2 inches, it's going right through their head.
Oh my God, that's so scary.
It is. And what's scary is, Dr. Laura, we really ultimately haven't had enough experience to know what the ultimate impact will be.
Right. It's too early to say.
Right. But man, you should be careful about that. If you use a cell phone for 10 minutes, you are probably okay. If you use it for hours at a time, once a day, 7 days a week, and you're a heavy user, you are 3 times more likely to get frontal lobe cancer. So it's not like there's no impact. We know there are, but we're continuously learning more and more as we go on. So let me go back to your other question about the safeness of a cell phone. 1.6 watts is the power level, and we know that it depending on who it would be, the person using the phone, just the penetration. And what's the impact? Well, we know from some research that a 0.1 watt signal, that is 15 times less power, can mutate and damage the frontal lobe cell. So it's not as if it takes a lot of power, but when you have persistent exposure, there could be potentially a more sinister response to that over time for anybody using it for an extended period of time. So it doesn't take much. What's interesting about that, by the way, Dr. Laura, we're not really that concerned about the frontal lobe brain cancer. All that, by the way, has been growing 2% per year, compounding every year for the last 10 years. It's the impact to the other parts of your body, the electromagnetic hypersensitivity response. We know the body is sitting there, and I don't know if you've heard about this. Some experts refer to it as oxidative stress, which is how the body reacts to all external stimulus. And that's where there's an imbalance of free radicals and antioxidants in the body. That does not describe, in my personal opinion, what the real concerns are. Well, we know from study work that's been recently done that the cell actually, the cell is has a very fundamental response to the environment it's in, and they call it cell danger response. Anytime there's a interaction with a electromagnetic radiation, chemicals, physical, bio threats of any sort, the cell responds to that, and it shuts down to some extent, doesn't generate the proteins it needs, doesn't do a lot of things it should be. It's sort of like when you go outside and you have pollen and you can't breathe. When you come back in, your body's having a response. That's a very fundamental body response. And there's a histamine that's occurring. The body's basically saying, I'm going to go protect myself from this. And the way I'm going to do it is by swelling my nasal passage. It's a very fundamental response. Well, that's what's happening with the rest of the body when you're exposed to electromagnetic radiation. You're actually disrupting the body function, and it does have potential impact at the weirdest places, and so.
What I was hearing from you is that the tissues that are the softest are the most
Yes.
at risk for damage, cellular
Yes.
damage.
Yep.
So, and probably also more external as well, right? So, brain is at least kind of behind the skull. There's a little protection there, but like the thyroid, the ovaries.
Oh, yes, absolutely. No problem. But Dr. Laura, I think you brought up an interesting point. There's a blood-brain barrier in the brain, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's a protective shield. And I mentioned to you, Dr. Ali's work is about how your immune suppressed. Well, it's also true that the blood-brain barrier is affected as well. In fact, some physicians consider it a concussion-like symptoms when they have patients that come in. And it's because the blood-brain barrier is dropping and exposing more of the soft tissue to the signals themselves, particularly when it's close by.
Wow. And then that means other chemicals in the body are also
Yes.
able to get into the brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's really scary.
And think of this, because now we're on this path of what happens to the body. Well, when you're immune suppressed, you often find electro-hypersensitive have gut problems.
Uh-huh.
Leaky gut. Leaky gut, biome imbalance. You have what do they call it? You have some of the FC is one example of a virus that actually increases in volume where it shouldn't be and can be very lethal. So we know that there seems to be correlation between the suppression of the body from these kinds of things with other body functions, not just the brain, but the heart, the gut. And you really have to sort of be aware that these kinds of things may happen. But if you're aware of these things, it actually is not a big deal if you deal with it and understand your environment.
Okay, so how do we deal with it? I mean, technology is not going away.
Right.
And most of us don't live off the grid out in the woods. So how do we kind of protect ourselves despite our environment and despite our need, actually our dependency on technology?
10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, my sons were visiting me, and they're adult men, and they had their laptops on their laps 3 or 4 hours. And my wife said that can't be good. I want grandchildren. She perceived the potential danger of that technology as potentially suppressing their ability to have children. I told her she was nuts because she didn't know what she was talking about, right? But I actually worked for Bell Labs for many years and developed standards in this area. So I was familiar with the technologies. And I looked into the scientific implications, and I found what we were chatting about. There's implications, and we knew it back 10 years ago. And I said to my sons that's terrible. We have this technology around us. What are we going to do about it? And so what I concluded was, actually, there are things you can do about it. Like the strength of a signal is distance is your friend. If you have a device next to you and it's touching your body, by moving it 1 to 2 feet away, 80% of the danger of that transmission is gone. If it's 4 foot away, it's 98%. So simply by moving these technologies away from you just by a little bit, you really do benefit. And I had mentioned before something about timing. The more you use it, the worse it is. Well, duration of exposure. Duration of exposure, when you're exposed for a very short period of times, you're pretty safe. But if it's hours at a time, it could be more impactful to the body as a result of that. So by limiting time with technology around you, you're safest. And of course, finally, what I did with my sons is I actually built shielding for my sons because I said to them, we're not victims. I can shield the omnidirectional signal, and I can prevent it from touching the soft tissue of your body, and then you can go on and continue using your technology. So you try to find ways of working with the technology in a way that reduces that exposure. Rather than using Wi-Fi, for example, use the Ethernet connection, a piece of wire. You eliminate the emissions of that Wi-Fi by simply going on and turning and going directly electronically through wiring to the devices. In fact, it's a general rule I have. I refer to it as bees in the room. One bee won't kill you, 1,000 will. So when you have all these transmitters in your environment, particularly your close environment, in your living room, in your bedroom, by simply moving away the technology or turning off the technologies, you reduce your exposure. So you go from 1,000 to 1 by simply turning what you don't need off. A cell phone, for example. I have a cell phone and I have the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, and the cellular connection. Well, I don't use anything other than the cellular connection. So I turn those other two functions off in the cell phone, and I've taken 3 of those Bs and I've made it 1. So simply by being aware of your environment and the technology around you, you can simply reduce exposures by turning stuff off, wiring it, or using shielding devices. So there's things you can do.
And I want to talk more about the shielding devices, but before we get there, I just realized I had mentioned something like those smartwatches and how people wear them all the time, right? They just take them off like to shower, and how people like to, or like a Fitbit, something like that. They use it to track their sleep. I have concerns about how that's actually impacting their sleep because they're wearing it, right? These wearable devices.
Dr. Laura, wonderful question, because I was in a yoga class and I had one of the teachers come up to me and show me this thing on her band, how wonderful it was. She's going to know how healthy she is. And I said, you realize that I'm an electromagnetic radiation expert. You have a Bluetooth transmitter transmitting constantly to your devices. And again, that's 0.3 watts. And I mentioned before with DNA damaged cells, it can be 0.1 watts, 3 times less power. So I said, you do not want that around your body all day. You do not want it. There's benefits, but unfortunately, there are negative downsides to it because of the way they're transmitting all the time. If it's a very periodic transmission, once a day, you're fine. But if it's a constant transmission, these devices that you're using to monitor your body, particularly at night, is disruptive technology that you probably better off not using. Because it could have more serious effects on your body.
It's that pros versus cons, right? And I mean, it is cool, like to be able to measure what your REM looks like and how restful your sleep is and your heart rate and things like that. But if it's going to be overexposure of this EMF, then we can see how that can be detrimental.
Yeah, actually, I was working with one clinic, and they were um, uh, understanding the biological impact by looking for biomarkers of the body throughout a 24 cycle day. And they had monitors like that. And what they found was something like half of the patients they were working with had disruption in those biomarkers as a result of those transmissions from that device. So they had to take it out of the study. So in that case, they believe they found direct correlation of impact of the body, not long lasting necessarily, but certainly temporary body response to that signal.
Right. And for a lot of people, they have the wearable devices on, all day, every day for years, right?
Yeah, right. And that's actually something we should chat about. If you're electric hypersensitive this year, you're more likely next year to have it more severe. The trends over time to get worse, not better. So you really, when you sort of figure out that this stuff may be bothering you, or you want to be conservative, and you want a conservative principle about what you do with technology, you may want to think about avoiding these kinds of things for that reason.
Right. And there's a lot of moms listening. And, we even know, like myself, I have a toddler, and, there's times that the tablet is our go to just to like get through a dinner or something
Right.
like that. Right.
Yeah.
So, what's a good way to protect, my son's growing, developing body from this EMF?
You triggered something in my mind when you mentioned that. People put in their crib, near the cribs, these devices that monitor the child. These are
Right.
Wi-Fi transmitters that are close to the child's head and transmitting 24 hours a day. So that is not necessarily a good thing for that child at that time.
So, what if it's like a few feet away from the crib, something like that?
I was talking about before about when you have a device 4 foot away, you're 98% except for when you sleep. I really, really do encourage there to be at minimum 10 feet, but certainly if you can do it, outside the space in another
Right.
room.
I
You do
keep my
not
cell
want
phone in the bathroom because I don't want it on my nightstand. My husband keeps his on his nightstand, which drives me nuts. I gotta have him listen to this
Dr. Laura,
episode.
I actually I was talking with this really, really bright lady, and it was during a podcast. And I said, you really have to consider your bedroom a sanctuary and get everything out of it, to make sure you have a pattern of sleep that's good for health. And she was very nice to me, thanking me for all the insight I was offering her. She didn't believe a word I said. And 4 weeks later, she called me up and she said, my husband and I are sleeping. We took the cell phones off the table and put them in other rooms, and we have more sound sleep. So there we had a case where, she was an educated lady and she didn't believe me, but it's true. It affects your sleep.
It does. And ever since I had my son, I was using my cell phone for my alarm clock pre-child, and now I don't need an alarm clock because I have a child. So I was like, I realized
a clock, right?
yeah, and yeah, if you do need an alarm clock, you certainly can get an old-fashioned one that doesn't have EMF, right? But my husband's like, oh, I need my cell phone. It's like a crutch. And I've been trying to model for him, like, hey, you can just keep it right outside our room in the bathroom. If it rings, we'll still hear it, but it's in a separate room. And maybe his sleep is not he has poor sleep, so I feel like that's like an easy first step to try to improve sleep.
Yeah, actually, when I come home at night, I take my cell phone and I put it on a counter that's 100 foot away, 50 foot away from my bedrooms, 50 foot away from my living quarters. It's the front door. It's very convenient. I can hear it and I can order ignore it if I want, but if I want to pick it up, I go get it. And that simple sort of rules about your environment really does have an impact. And it's like, I mentioned before the wiring. I actually Ethernet wired my house because I didn't want the Wi-Fi on. And actually I get better service with the Ethernet wiring because I'm not using the Wi-Fi. But if you have a Wi-Fi, put a timer on it. When you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock, whenever you go to bed, have the timer, turn it off. And when you get up early in the morning, 6, 7 o'clock, whatever it may be, you have the automatically turned on. You won't even know it's
I
not
didn't
working.
even know there is a timer
Yeah.
for the
Yeah,
router.
$10 little timer you get at Home Depot that has an on-off function, timing. The Christmas light controls, they have timers
Right.
that can be set, and that's what you want. You are eliminating the bees in the room when you do that.
Right. Yeah, it makes so much sense.
Right.
So
And you
go ahead.
mentioned earphones, earbuds that are
Earbuds,
Bluetooth
yeah.
based, right?
Yes.
Some, not all, communicate completely through your head. So, am I a proponent of that? Absolutely not, particularly for the young. There is unknown long-term impacts that really no one really knows. But as I mentioned before, a Bluetooth signal is 0.3 watts, and it takes 1 watt, 0.1 watt to disrupt the cell and damage the cell.
You mean like 0.1?
0.1, yeah,
Oh my
point
God, that's
0.1.
tiny.
It's nothing. I mean, and this is study work that's been around probably 20 years ago, and it was specifically to see the impact of the brain. And there was clear evidence that it didn't take much. So precautionary measures about that kind of stuff. Here's the rule of thumb. When you have a cell phone to your head, that's probably the worst you can have. If you're using it on speaker, much better. And you're avoiding the closeness to the important parts of the body, particularly thyroid too, by the way. And I mentioned something about that in a minute. If you have a wired connection to pure earbuds, that's better than putting it to your head. There's a bit of exposure, but not much. So you think of it a good, better, best. A good is to your head, better is in your hand, best is using earbuds. Simple things to keep you protected. The thyroid, if you have Wi-Fi, a certain genetic cell, and you use fluoride, you are 3 times more likely to have thyroid cancer. Yale came out with that study about 3 years ago, I think. So we know combinations of our environmental stuff does also play a role in how the body responds to this stuff.
Right. It's not just the one, but it is
Right.
cumulative.
Right. Yeah, it's just another toxin, right, Dr.
Right.
Laura? It's just another
Right.
toxin.
Let's talk about shielding devices. I mean, there's so much out there. It can be confusing about what it is, if it's legit. My
Yeah,
husband's a little skeptical about that stuff. I have some things in our home that I plug in to the outlet. He thinks it's a scam.
yeah. Well, this is a topic that is hard to talk about because there's a gamut of offerings. Some that defy physics. It doesn't exist in physics, and they claim it does. To others that talk about it as effective and understand physics. So it's really hard to tell. When you talk about wall stuff like you just mentioned, they actually may work for extremely low frequency emissions, but not for radio frequency emissions, the stuff we talked about from all our devices. So there's this false perception that we are safe. The reality of it is it only does one, not the other. There's some
What's the
stuff that,
difference? I'm confused by that.
yeah, and I don't think I explained that. Remember, we started off by talking about refrigerators and
Yes.
wiring in the wall. That's
Yeah.
extremely low frequency emissions.
Oh, okay.
Anything that uses electricity generates a byproduct of electromagnetic radiation, but it's on the very low side of the spectrum. That's why they call it extremely low frequency. The other stuff we talked about, the cell tower connections or Wi-Fi, that's all radio frequency. And for those who want to have a calibration, a microwave oven works at 2.3 watts, 2.3 gigahertz. A Wi-Fi works at 2.4 gigahertz. It's virtually the same signal. The difference is in the microwave oven, the power levels are 1,000 times higher than a cell phone. But think about what the 2.4, 2.3 gigahertz is doing. It's actually heating the water of the cells and oscillating the cells. So when I talk about thermal impact, not biological, it's because it's a microwave. That's what it does. You put something in a microwave oven and you push go and it oscillates the cells and cooks the meat. Well, that's what it does when it hits your head, but at much lower levels. So it's a microwave signal.
Oh, geez. So we're like microwaving our body.
Literally. And as we talked from the very beginning, the body just doesn't know what to do with it.
Right.
It really just doesn't know what to do with it. It's been around so shortly.
Huh. All right. So how do we talk? Let's talk about shielding. Like, how do we shield ourselves if we are going to use our cell phone and tablet and laptop?
So, I often like to say that, we've talked about some rules about distance and time, duration, how you configure stuff. If you were to be diligent about that, by and large, you're pretty safe. And so you wouldn't be worried about or concerned about the health dangers to your body if you had a good practice about the technology you use. If you choose to use a cell phone to your head, which, by the way, I do, you want to be able to make sure you shield it. You want to make sure that the omnidirectional signal can only go out to the cell tower, but not through your head. That's what a shield does. And so there are some technologies that offer that. And those are pretty sound technologies when you shield it. Some of these other things that they put a tiny little device in the corner of the bottom of the cell phone, or they have another device in the room that says you're protected. By and large, those are more suspicious because of those kinds of claims.
Yeah, like a little circle that you stick on the back of your phone. That's not going to do it.
Right. Well, no. Well, you think about. Look, I don't want to suggest that there's no fancy technology that's evolved that I don't know about that's being applied, but by and large, I'm pretty familiar with the technologies. And if there's something you want to look at as a possible buy, look and see what independent laboratory testing they've done. And if you can show through evidence that it does work, then that will be a better way of ensuring the product you're buying, it works. One thing I don't like, Dr. Laura, is there are devices out there that talk about the proof that something works is looking at the congestion of red blood cells or heart variant. Those are transient response the body has and are considered indirect response. you're not worried so much about that as you are the long-term response. And so when you're looking at the research work that sort of substantiates the claim, be careful of indirect descriptions of success or how it operates, because those are transient typically. And laboratory studies of independence that you want to look for were clear and evident transport known signals and the absence of those signals. And so you, as a precautionary measure, simply try to find evidence that it works. If they say something happens, it works, and they don't tell you why and how it's been verified by an independent study, do not buy it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like really the technology that is been proven is an actual physical barrier that goes on your phone, for example, or whatever device you're using, mobile device, and you're still going to be able to get your phone will still work because it's connect. I guess I don't understand. You're just saying the side that's close to your body is protected, and then the side that's going out to the cell tower is open.
Yes, that's exactly right, Dr. Laura.
And so it doesn't diminish your cell reception or anything like that.
You're not modifying the signal in any way or disrupting that transmission in any way. You're really literally doing nothing except stopping the signal from where you don't want it to go.
And so what does the research show how that protects our body from cancer, fertility, some of the other health issues you mentioned?
That's a good question. It turns out that you're not concluding with a shield that there's an adjustment to the percent cancer rate as a result of that use. What you're saying is that you're eliminating the signal completely, irrespective of the body that you're testing. So you're not making claims like that. You're making claims that says nothing can go through, and it is not the source of your emission problem if you get a cancer or not.
So it's almost, I mean, is this true that you could say that it's like it's almost like you're not using a cell phone when you have a shield on it, even though you are?
Exactly. That's exactly what you're doing. You're eliminating that as a potential completely. Some do it better than others. Many do it, up to 60, 80%, and then some do it up to 100%.
Oh, right. So that percentage makes a difference too.
It really does. That sort of gives you an idea of caliber of a design, is what percent are you actually shielding?
Right. So one last question I have for you.
Sure.
Can you explain what 5G is and why we need to be talking about that?
Okay, so I'd love to. We have danced around the standard a little bit, the 1.6 watts per kilogram. What we haven't talked about is that what is the power levels to what transmission that's occurring. So 30, 40 years ago, we had the first time a cell phone was created. So we call it the first generation. And that was an analog signal at that time. And then we had another generation called second, up to the fourth generation. Every time it changed, it evolved the way the transmission was occurring, the way the voice was being captured and the way it was being disseminated at the far end. So we know up to 4G, which is about 1 gigahertz for cell phones, and up to 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi, that there's a preponderance of evidence that says we should be careful because we know there are biological impacts and we should be concerned about that. Well, 5G is a lot of similar transmission rates. So a lot of what you hear today is 5G, this major carrier with this 5G service. It's really about 3.4 gigahertz, 3.6 gigahertz, 900 megahertz, stuff that's been around all along that they're deploying in a bigger, more comprehensive infrastructure. And so a lot of the stuff we hear about, we don't need to really worry about it too much because it's a bunch of the same. What's really different is that they call it small cell sites. There's going to be your TV broadband service that's provided with a cable company today can actually be a small cell site tower in front of your home that's transmitting wirelessly into your home. And that is typically around 23 gigahertz. But by the way, 1 gigahertz is 1 billion cycles per second. 23 gigahertz is 23 billion cycles per second. So now all of a sudden you have 23 billion cycles per second entering into your home. And it's a digital signal. And they're actually transmitting to your one device. So where there was one signal we had in the previous technologies, we now have two. They call it MIMO. There's technology they're using is creating more. So the concern around 5G is all around the small cell site transmissions that are above the typical 10 gigahertz. 6 to 10 gigahertz and up to as much as 300 gigahertz, with the deployment now around 23 gigahertz to 60. Those deployments are in the very early infant stage, and they're typically in downtown metropolitan areas where there's a congestion of service. And what they do is rather than run a bunch of wires, a bunch of fiber optic cables, they run this small cell site tower and they transmit into the environment. So we're only beginning to have the deployment of what really is the very concerning space. And what makes it concerning, Dr. Laura, is we know nothing about it.
It's a big experiment.
It's a big experiment. It hasn't existed in our environment ever. At a commercial level like we have it now. And so you have so many world experts saying, foul, you can't do this. And that's really part of the reason is we just don't know. And it's also true that those who are in the business speculate that what we've seen up to 4G may actually push into 5G worse.
Right. More symptoms, more health issues.
So we talked about bugs in the stomach before, right?
Right.
And the biome, there are 10 times more bugs and bacteria and virus in the stomach than there is cells in the body. So when you disrupt that, it gets pretty disrupting to your body. And we also spoke about those, oh, no, we didn't actually. The bugs in your gut, like RF, they sort of propagate in RF. And so when you go to 23 gigahertz and above that, we know from some study work, the bugs even like it more.
Wait, so the good bacteria or the bad bacteria?
Good and bad.
Both.
It's potentially imbalancing as it does today. So there's a concern that without any study work, we're going to see more of that. By the way, 5G was the source of the pandemic. That's why, literally, that's why, Dr. Laura, some MD was trying to explain that a virus was stimulated in the gut. And that's what the source was. But the guy was a moron. The gut doesn't invent bacteria and virus.
Right.
It doesn't create it.
No.
It actually houses it.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
host.
yeah, it's the host, right? So that's what a lot of the concerns and controversy about that was misleading.
But I can see why 5G would lower our immune system
Oh
and
yeah,
make us predisposed not only for microbial imbalance, but certainly compromised immune system where you're more prone to a viral infection, for example.
yes, there's no question about that. That is one thing that you should be careful about because evidence up to 4G suggests that's true.
So we don't really have hardly any scientific evidence about what 5G is, like, and its impact on health in the human body.
None.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely
I
none.
would say that I've, in the alternative health world, there's a lot of outcries because people in general are more sensitive. Their bodies are more sensitive. They're more in tune to their environment and how it impacts their body, and including children. And this people are like, I am not feeling well with this 5G.
Yeah. And they really do feel it.
Yeah.
There's no question. And we didn't talk about this, but I did infer it before. When you talk about the frontal lobe exposures to these kinds of things, um, and and then we call it electromagnetic radiation. I didn't talk about what was going on. Well, it turns out that we see in electric hypersensitive that the brain pattern at night should be the brain pattern of the day. So when you're walking around where there should be alpha, it's beta, and vice versa. So we find it's disrupting not just the cell itself, but the function. The brain
The brain waves.
is the brain waves literally that we use in our pattern. And when you go to sleep at night and you have this influence, you're never going to sleep right. You never go into sleep. You're never going to go through that. So we know these kinds of things are potentially possible. With 5G, I mentioned before that bees in a room, right? Well, 5G is killer bees in the room. They're probably going to be worse than currently what we have. No one really knows. So everything you hear about is a speculative. But I certainly don't think it's out of the realm of reasonable to say it's the killer bee.
Oh, that's so scary.
It is.
Well, I am so happy that you took the time to come on the show today and share your passion for this topic and wisdom. And now I'm hoping that the families listening are going to feel better prepared of how we can be proactive in limiting your exposure and your family's exposure to EMF.
Yes. Yeah, we did have a chance to talk a lot of different things about this subject matter. And I truly, truly believe old men, you don't you don't need to worry about them understanding this stuff. It's the moms.
Yes.
It's the moms that need to understand this stuff because it's the
Yes.
children being affected.
Right. And children are going to be even more exposed to technology than ever before, right? Like it's just part of
Right.
their education now. So we need to, as moms, know what we need to do to keep our children safe.
Right. And I always say we are the architect of our own destiny when it comes to these kinds of things. We are the one that control our environment. You're not going to open up a can of gas in the middle of the living room while you're watching TV. Why? Because those multiple chemical sensitivity can occur with volatile organic compounds in the air. It's a toxin in the air. No different, by the way, with the WHO, World Health Organization, believes that those fumes are exactly the same kind of toxin as electromagnetic radiation. It's a possible carcinogenic.
Right. Yeah, it is. Wow. Well, Dan, once again, thank you so much for coming on today, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Wow, I certainly learned a lot from Daniel today on EMF and how it's impacting our health and specifically the health of our growing and developing children. If you want to learn more about products that are #1 rated EMF radiation shielding, check out Daniel's website at Defender Shield so you can learn better how to protect yourself and your family.